why Pan Africanism is bullshit. I was listening to an episode of the Zowhat show. I love that show. And it was entitled Killmonger versus T'Challa. And this was supposed to cover the ever popular in the black YouTube space topic of African Americans versus Africans. Now, I listen to a lot of these debates, and often what happens, I listen to UK black Brits versus African Americans. I've listened to Africans versus African Americans, Jamaicans versus African Americans, any other black group versus African Americans. There is a YouTube topic on it, right? And I noticed I got really into watching these for a while, and I noticed something. I noticed that 9 times out of 10, these Africans versus African American topics, there's an entire panel of Africans that'll be there to discuss the African side. And there could be anywhere from 0 to maybe 1 or 2 African Americans. Usually, even when they have the people on the African American side, they're like second generation born American Africans or Africans. The second thing I notice is, and this happens even when there's an actual African American there, they're usually a Pan Africanist. And a Pan Africanist isn't really an African American. They're actually fundamentally different, because a Pan Africanist is fundamentally ashamed of their African American heritage. And they have a longing to, in their mind, belong to something more. You got to think of a Pan Africanist almost like African Americans are all adopted children. We're not even adopted. We're all bastard children. But the Pan Africanist is like that kid that wants to find its biological parents and doesn't realize that its biological parents abandoned it. Pan Africanists kind of kiss up to Africans, but I'll get to that in a minute. But the second thing I was saying I notice is that even when there are maybe 1 or 2 African Americans on the stage, the conversation normally goes completely one way. And what I mean by that is the Africans can come up and spout falsehoods, misconceptions, generalizations. No one calls them on their shit at all. And the African American that goes up against them is normally a cherry-picked idiot, or someone who may not be an idiot, but admittedly isn't as deep on the subject as somebody who is well versed in it and could really stand to go up there and speak on the African American side. Now, when you think about this, there really is no reason why there should be Africans versus African Americans. And if there was, Africans would be the ones that would be on the heels of their feet, so to speak. But the African versus African American argument goes a little something like this. African Americans are lost, and they're jealous of Africans because it's their time now, and they work hard, and they're hardworking immigrants. And African Americans need to be quiet and be happy for their superior, pure-blooded African brothers, and just focus on getting food stamps and maybe work on not being so ghetto. I really don't know where to start. Now, where I should say my frustration came from people like Zoe on this episode was, if you're going to name an episode Killmonger versus T'Challa, remember Killmonger whooped T'Challa's ass in a fair one. So if you're going to name something Killmonger versus T'Challa, you got to have the spirit of Killmonger, because Africans have the spirit of T'Challa. Now, I don't know if it's because Zoe Williams is light-skinned or because he got hazily eyes. I don't know what it is, but he just really wasn't acting very field Negro-ish. and he wasn't explaining our case very well. And it ended like it always. He has another guy on the show who's actually usually very knowledgeable, but a lot of Pan Africanists can get mesmerized by African mumbo jumbo. You know, stories of kings and queens and civilizations and whatnot that rival old world white civilizations, and they can make you feel with pride and all that bullshit, and distracts you off the fact that for your ass and your ancestors, at some point all that shit came to a crashing halt, and your reality was this 400 years of hard work that you seem to be ashamed of. You know, you can hear a lot of the insults from a lot of the backhanded insults from Pan Africanists when you really, really listen to the shit they say. Oh, we were more than just slaves. Well, the slaves were more than just slaves. The people who were kings and queens in ancient Africa were more than likely the people who sold you the hell off into your slavery. That's the part a lot of African Americans that become Pan-Africanists don't like to admit, is that if you were a beggar and a peasant over here in America, odds are your ancestors were beggars and peasants over in Africa. Those are the kind of people that get shipped off into slavery and don't nobody say nothing. It's just being honest. It's not making fun of us. To be an African American, you really have to have a certain amount of humility and realization about your life and your lineage. But if you also look at it the other way, there's a lot of reason to have pride. If somebody looks at it like, ha ha ha, you were just a slave, sure. But if you look at it like you're literally the freedom part of the free world, I mean, it's not like anybody freed you, you know. But to really have a sense of pride in being a Black American, you have to have an understanding of your actual history. That's, again, another story. But I never hear anybody in these debates really put up a good argument for Black Americans. And so this is my attempt. And also an attempt to point out a lot of the flaws in Pan-Africanism. Black Americans have been really the only true participants as a group in Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism is the idea that all blacks are going to go back to Africa to repatriate the continent and build and, you know, collect and exploit the resources for ourselves and everything like that. Black Americans have been pretty true to that ideal, despite being, you know, a whole ocean away and 400 years away. Black Americans have always extended a hand to all kind of blacks across the world, as evidenced by the fact that they're here. One big misconception and misunderstanding is that by Africans, continental Africans and Caribbean Africans alike, is that they're here because white folks are nice to them. That's a misunderstanding. This is the number one reason why Africans and Caribbean Africans don't really put respect on our name, is the fact that they don't understand that they're not here because white folks got nice. They're literally here because of a civil rights act that we fought for that put them in here. We specifically brought Africans in as reinforcements. And in those times, they really were reinforcements. The Africans in those times used to actually be helpful. More so the Caribbeans than the continental Africans. So if it wasn't for us, so the next time any African immigrant ever starts a sentence off of "we come here and we work hard," you lost this argument at "we come here," because "we come here" would not have been possible without African Americans. There would be no here for you to come to, and you wouldn't be allowed to come here. That's the second part of that. They don't understand that the country that they love so much over here doesn't really come from white folk. It comes from black folks. The opportunity that's afforded to them here comes off the back of black slaves. So whenever there's an argument between African Americans and Africans about any kind of a split, that's not even really the first thing that they have to understand. That's just the privilege we give them to prove that we got love for them. Whenever they try to accuse us of not having love for them, we've historically always had love for them. That right there should kill it. You wouldn't be here if it was not for us. We deliberately made a path for you to come in. 2, we would not be here if it weren't for you selling us out. Now, this is something that I know is very touchy for Africans, but what Africans have to understand is when they talk about the split and the divide and the issue between us, even if African Americans don't explicitly say this, the number one reason for trust issues with you Africans, especially you West Africans, is the fact that you guys did sell us into slavery and that you lie about it even to this day. I'm just putting that out there in as plain of terms as I can possibly put it. Would you trust a nigga that stole from you and that you know stole from you, that you got on camera having stole from you, and he's still sitting there denying, I don't know what happened, man. I didn't do nothing. Come on, man. That's Africans. We not stupid. We see all the forts like Armina Castle that are on the coast. We know we all came from further inland, sometimes as far as Central Africa. It's not possible for the white man to come. I mean, hell, you got African Americans that was living for hundreds of years comfortable, accepting the fact that, damn, maybe Africans were just so damn weak that the white man just marched in and took all their shit from the country. They couldn't have stopped them. They're just too weak and primitive. But you can't tell both lies at the same time. You can't tell us about the Africa you don't see, they don't want you to see, and how we were kings and we weren't as primitive as you think, which is true. But like I said, you can't tell two lies at once. Once you tell that lie and go, okay, well, if you were on par with their military, how the fuck did they, how do we get taken out of there? And the truth is, you cooperated with them. You didn't sell us as a peace treaty because you were fearful and you wanted to spare the rest of your tribes and the rest of your countries. It was a money-making scheme. In fact, you guys didn't start beefing with Europeans until they cut y'all off. Until they said, we're going to grow our own niggers in-house. That's when countries like America switched from transatlantic slave trade. Note how it's called the trade, not theft. They switched from this transatlantic slave trade to breeding their slaves in their own countries. So once they started doing that and they cut Africans out, now Africa wanted to start going to war with all these European countries. And what prompted me to even make this video was somebody asked Zoe this question, and he, being the African American in the room, rather than addressing that, laughed it off and never said nothing, and then went back into wanting to hear fantasy stories about Mansa Musa and whatnot. Now, those two things are important to understand. It's sort of like being in a mall and you can't get to where you're looking for unless you look at that big map that says you are here. African Americans have been in America for over 400 years because Africans sold us out. Literally sold us out of the country, out of the entire continent. That's not a euphemism. That's not an overgeneralization. It's not an unfounded accusation. That is literal fact. And it's actual literal fact that Africans wouldn't have been able to come here the easy way if it weren't for African Americans opening the back door after we got to the other end of the plantation. So those are two things we gotta always establish when having these African versus African American arguments, because those things get lost and we start going right into talking about who called who an African booty scratcher in the 1990s. And that's the reason why they don't like us. Come on now, let's be realistic. So we understand those two things first and foremost. Most African Americans don't know, and in the case of a lot of Pan Africanists, don't want to believe that Africans did that to us, because that changes the whole dynamic. Most of us don't want to believe that, or haven't even looked into that as a possibility, and have often taken that as an insult from white folks that they would even make such an accusation, which still doesn't absolve them from guilt, because even if the Africans did sell us to them, who the hell would be buying people? Some of the excuses that Africans have given us have been really asinine, and it's a shock that we even let those ride. Our slavery was different. It was indentured servitude. We didn't know what the white man was going to do when they bought you. We didn't know where you went. When articles like the New York Times article that came out, My Great Grandfather, the Nigerian slave trader, tells you that the Africans that would trade slaves would be on the boats heading to school off in Europe. Which brings me to my next point. Africans get very, very mad about the phrase African booty scratcher, but I want to clarify something, at least from what I understood growing up as a kid. Kids would say African booty scratcher as just a phrase to make fun of Africans being primitive, but adults would say that phrase, or slightly older ones, more militants would say that phrase. It wasn't your own booty that you were scratching. It was the white man's booty you were scratching. The Africans in the bush are the Africans, a lot of modern Africans, they talk about Africa that you don't see, or the Africa they don't want you to see. And what that usually means is just, the modern cities of Africa, the buildings, the cars, the McDonald's and all that kind of stuff. And to be honest with you, that's cool and all, and we've been known you guys have modern cities. We're not idiots, that's always what they love to talk about, is that African Americans are lost and dumb and think that Africa's a big hut. We don't think that shit. We know white folks is lying. Funny thing is, y'all seem to believe these same white folks that say we're all heathens and thugs and lazy. But we know that there are modern cities in Africa. The thing is, we come from America. We want to see modern cities that we can't live in or something. We just look at America. If African Americans are coming to Africa, they want Africa. We want the people in the bush. Those are the people that can probably tell us what the hell happened. And most importantly, those people, those poor people in the bush, aren't the same as the African elites that come over here to America, which brings me to my third point. We know what happened. We know how we got here. We know how you got here, because we helped you get here. But we also know if you are an African immigrant, you can drop the poor African shtick. We know you're African elite if you're over here on American soil. If you made it over here to America, that took money to get here. That took connections to get here. Every one of these these quote unquote poor Africans that come over here got educated parents that are professionals with professional jobs. That's how they get over here. So you can drop the poor African shtick. You should be paying taxes out the gang. They get to come over here. You get to come over here and play the poor African role. Sign up and get every benefit possible as an African American or as an immigrant or both. We know what the deal is. See, Mexican immigrants, you never know what you're going to get. You could get a rich Mexican, Or you could get some poor guy that snuck over a border. The proximity makes that possible. But everybody else that got to come over a body of water to get over here, yeah, it costs money to get over here. That's why most African immigrants aren't even illegal immigrants. And if you pay attention to what I said earlier about y'all selling us out, there's a good 50-50 chance that, you know, you're probably an African elite because your great grandpa did something funny. So now understanding factually where I'm coming from, you can see how it's a little ridiculous for an African who's sitting on American soil because of what we did for him, even after what y'all did to us. And we know how you got here. You probably got here on slave trade money, and you're allowed here on the backs of slaves putting in work and opening the door for you, only for you to come here and talk shit and be in direct opposition to us. You also don't seem to understand, well, to be fair, even African Americans don't seem to understand this, but you also don't seem to understand that Black Americans are the tiebreaker vote in the country. And if we all decided to say, I don't know, roll with the Republicans on their hard stance on even legal immigration and kick everybody out, let's be honest, we know your black asses will be the first ones to go. The model minority shtick only works when there's a few of you. Ask the Japanese. The model minority shtick only works when there's a few of you. Look at the tensions in Minnesota with the Somalis. And when these white folks start getting antsy and you start seeing their true face, who you think you're going to be able to run to? The same people you depend on to do everything for you here. And really, I shouldn't have added the word here, because another thing about it is when you really think about Pan Africanism, it's really like somebody asking you to come over and fix their house. Somebody pumping you up to come fix their house and telling you how beautiful the house could be and how much potential the house is going. Oh, it's so big, it's on so much square footage, and there's a pond. But they never mention what the hell you're going to get out of the house as far as ownership once you get done contributing. You hear all the time from Africans, oh, you Black Americans deny that you're African. And I always tell them back, and this is what you can tell them back too. No. You deny that I'm African. Name me what country I came from that I can now get access and land and citizenship to. They'll mention the right to abode, but even with that year of return in 2019, that's a trap, by the way, Black folks. I got excited by that too. I love the imagery. I started doing some research. That shit's a trap. We're not doing that one. We're not going anywhere that the U.S. military is already sitting up waiting for. They just moved into Ghana. But we don't get to claim any citizenship or any land out in Africa. Africa doesn't recognize Black America as a nation within the African Union. It doesn't even recognize Haiti or Jamaica. It's considering Israel, though. Go figure. Next time an African pulls one of them moves, you got to make sure that shit cuts both ways. We have African DNA. We have African influence in much of what we do. From our, preference to drum and dance, some of the food choices we make, But the further out you get from Africa, the further that influence went away. And the thing that they don't understand about African Americans is, look at our music our music creations. We will flip something in a minute. And we've been flipping and making our own thing because we've been so far away from Africa that the only thing we got left is the color and the hairstyle. It's like going to Fiji and saying, well, you're African. Yeah, they're African DNA. The Australians got African DNA. We're not ashamed of being closely related to Africans. But Africans will be the first ones to tell you African Americans aren't African. So, which is it? So, we're going to come to your country in Pan Africanism and fix everything for you. And then they say, no, we don't need you to fix anything for us. Okay, we'll back up and not do anything. No, you're not helping. Okay, you want us to just jump in and, pop in where needed? Sure, okay, cool. So once we all come over here, are we all going to open up our own little enclave and be African Americans within Africa? No, you're not going to start your own thing and be separate from us. You're going to be with us. Okay, so we influence you guys' cultures over here. You guys influence our culture. No, we don't want any of your Black American ghetto culture. So you want us to come over here and shut up? Or come over here and pretend to be Africans so you can make fun of us wearing kente cloths and being lost? Which is it? Like, seriously, which is it? That's the main problem I have with this whole thing, is Africa versus African Americans is pointless because we've not really interacted with each other over 400 years. So anything Africans might think about African Americans, we're lost, we're this, that, we can continue to be lost. You didn't have to come find us. To be honest with you. If whatever was going to happen to us, it's going to happen to us regardless, right? So what's it matter to you? It's like Africans are trying to paint this whole Pan-African thing as if they're doing us a favor by allowing us to come over there. But in the same breath, then they say, hey man, you need to come over here and help. Well, what the hell is to help on if you guys got everything figured out? So we're supposed to come help a continent that don't need our help and that has everything figured out. And you go, wait a minute. How does that make sense? And then when you start asking those questions, you start realizing, wait a minute. How is it that you're a Nigerian and you're the best of the best and you're coming over here, and credit where credit's due, you're highly educated, and all you guys that are coming over here are got money and got education and training, and you say you're doing all this to go build and go back over there, but you niggas don't never go back over there except for to occasionally visit. Something don't add up. You can't say in one breath, silly Black American, you have nothing here, we have everything in our country, and then in the next breath say, you guys gotta come help because the generators at Lagos airport have gone out and we don't have any electricity at our freaking airport. Let's be honest for a second. You can't come over here, like, they come over here and give credit for anything good with America to white people and then say anything wrong with America is black people's fault, but can't explain why their countries be fucked up and they're the only ones in charge. They'll tell you to quit using slavery as an excuse, but if you start asking them why their country don't got no electricity in their airport, now that's not a, oh, Africans live in a hut stereotype. That's literally in 2018, Nigeria, your main #1 airport does not have consistent electricity. Now you say something like that to them that's factual, then you start getting the same people that told you let slavery go start telling you, oh, but colonialism and So wait a minute. So what you're saying is you couldn't handle white folks being at most 5 or 10% of your population. Yet you wonder why niggas in America can't get it together where they're 87% of the population. Got you. And then and then the thing that really cracks me up, and this is what I really wish Zoe Williams would have stepped up and said. They say we're lost and we don't have any culture, and they need to come to Africa or talk to Africans to get a sense of culture. My counter to that would be, what culture? Because, okay, you know your tribe, but you can't tell me what my tribe is, so I'm never going to get that aspect of me being lost, shaken off of me. So you can't help me with that. You can't tell me the truth about what happened to me, because then that would be implicating yourself in the guilt. So you're going to lie about that like they always do. Except for Ghana. I give props to Ghana. Ghana does at least try to apologize. And I believe Benin also. Benin, Togo. Okay, but you can't really tell me what happened. You can't help me retrace my roots in any real way. So that's out. It's not like I can learn about my original religion, because guess what? You go over to almost any part of Africa and they're bigger on white Jesus than we are. When you go to Africa or you talk to Africans, they're usually just a cheap imitation of Black Americans, of all the things wrong with Black Americans. If I want to see bad weaves in white Jesus, I can just go to the hood. You can't tell me that we're Europeanized and we're westernized and you bleach your skin. Like, get out of here. You say we deal with colorism. You bleach your skin. And it's not a one or two people thing. I just watched the Dr. Mumbi Saraki show. She said 77% of Nigerians, 50% of Ghanaians. Niggas ain't bleaching their skin in America like that. We got light skinned and dark skinned people because people was getting messed with by slave masters. It wasn't by choice. And, a lot of interracial marriage nowadays, I ain't gonna lie. But so what is this great thing the Africans are gonna come show us? See, I honestly feel like Black Americans, Africans try to make it seem like Black Americans think, you guys think we all live in huts. I think it's the opposite. I think the average African American grew up thinking, probably from teenage years on, elementary school, yeah, a lot of Black Americans probably think you grow up in huts, but you can't sit back and make fun of the Black Americans for thinking that and not looking at the textbooks that taught us that. But I think once you start to hit middle school and high school, a lot of Black Americans begin to become really, really Afrocentric and Pan Africanist. And a lot of African Americans, I feel, have too high of an opinion on Africa. Too high. They think it's Wakanda. And because of that, that gives these Africans the room to be uppity. Think about it. Black Americans made Black Panther, the movie. Nothing but like if you want to know what Black Americans think about Africa, there you go. That's literally a Hotepian wet dream right there. That doesn't look like no huts. In fact, they literally played on the idea of the outside world thinks we're primitive. That's what Black Americans think of Africa. And how did Africans take it? They looked at that movie, and rather than take it to be some kind of a unifying film between African Americans and Africans, which they talk about so much, they made that movie about their little thing. They took it as, this is our moment. And then they actually got mad about the Black Americans being in it, saying, it's cultural appropriation. Brotherhood. We can't go to them for any information any real information on our roots. Most of the information you get is corner hustlers telling you whatever you want to hear for a few dollars. A few dollars to tell you that you're related to any king you want to be related to. One person's telling you one thing, one person's telling you the other. You're not gonna go in and get no real sense of culture. You're just gonna see It's sort of like when you drive across country just to see another McDonald's. You're born in Seattle, you drove all the way to DC, and they got a McDonald's. Now their McDonald's might have slightly different things on the menu that fit the local palate, but it's still a McDonald's. That's what it's like. You get to see how black folks got conquered by white folk in more ancient times. That's all it is. You see a more primitive version of white supremacy, because primitive white supremacy still works on those people. I'm not calling those people primitive. I'm saying primitive white supremacy works on those people. It's not as subtle as it is in America. America's a media giant, propaganda giant. So it's got to be cutting edge propaganda. Africa, not so much. And I mean all 54 countries that comprise Africa. It doesn't change from coast to coast. I mean, so you're not getting any information on your roots. You're not getting any culture. Are you getting any kind of business advantages because you're both black or both African? No. In fact, not only will no African country give you any citizenship rights or any business exploits or anything like that, not only will they not give you any preferential treatment, they're going to give you the harshest treatment out of anybody that comes up to them. If you're Lebanese, you're going to get a better deal with any African country than if you're an African American. If you're Chinese, you'll be welcomed as a brother. If you're African American, they're going to make you go through all kinds of Ace Ventura rites of passage just to open a business over there. With the exception of Rwanda. Rwanda's a fast track for business. Shout out to Dr. Harnett. The Africans in Africa stay getting punked verbally, financially, and physically by non-black visitors. I just seen a video for Nairobi, Kenya, where one tiny little Chinese dude, and he must have knew Tai Chi out of this world, was just ragdolling about 3 or 4 full-grown Kenyan men who were like state officials. Just didn't respect anybody there. I mean, it's super obvious that every Chinese person in Africa is a spy. They even had one guy just break down. He just wanted to get sent home. He's flat out using spy words like assignment. Like, I've been assigned here. Africans constantly brag on their country from a standpoint of, look at all our resources. That's somebody who is a mark. If you knew a man on the street that bragged about who he was based on the jewelry he wore, that's the dude that's about to get robbed. The only people listening to you are the niggas that are about to rob you. You got no armies, no nothing. Just a bunch of resources to be plundered by all the real countries. And then you ask goofy ass questions like, why are black Americans afraid to come to Africa? I saw a episode of Drink Champs with Noriega, and he was interviewing Akon. And these niggas were so in awe of his Africanness and his whimsical tall tales of kings of years past that they didn't even catch the very first thing he said in the interview was, my father's from Senegal and he made sure to have me as a baby here in America just to, quote, get that out of the way. They passed right over that shit and went right into, how come you niggas don't visit Africa? We got real money. You niggas be playing with your money. You guys don't got no real money. You're slaves. And I'm thinking, wait. So your father left a beautiful, perfect Wakandan Senegal just to have you as a baby over here so that you could get American citizenship, which would not have been possible without black Americans that you're shitting on right now. Not only would it not have been possible, they wouldn't even let your black ass on the shore if it wasn't for Black Americans. But see, when you're entitled like most Africans are that are in this country, you don't even think about that. You don't even realize what he said. You can't ask me why I'm afraid to come to Africa if I can turn around and ask you, why aren't you in it still? A lot of the Africans that come here, they never go back. They'll tell you they're never going to go back. They chip off their family a couple dollars and they write them bullshit stories about how well they're doing. Or they're African elites and they weren't planning on going back in the first place anyway. They don't care about their countries. I just watched a video. Well, I watched parts of a video, I'm not going to lie, of a Congolese woman talking about how they don't want African Americans over there. Now, she is, and to her credit, she admits that she's tied in politically over there. Now, if you're the political elite, why the hell would you want Black Americans coming to your country in Africa, knowing we gonna set off let's just be real for a minute. The real reason why Africans want African Americans to come to their country is because African Americans got a reputation within the Black community, within the Black diaspora, for being the ones who will set it off. A lot of you Africans is getting punked in your own countries. You're getting punked by corrupt leaders. You're getting punked by the Chinese. You're getting punked by the Lebanese. You're still getting punked by the French and the British and the Dutch. And don't think I'm thumbing my nose at you. We getting punked by the Americans. So it is what it is. But they want us to come over there and be Eric Killmonger for them and push everybody out and help make everything right. And it's just like, for what? What are we gonna get out of that? And then to make matters worse, you come over here and make life trickier for us. You Africans get in our spaces because you look like us. They put you in our places because they know you'll speak nice on them. I'll clarify that. White folks put Black Africans in African American positions in media and in corporate settings because they are tamer and won't talk back to them and be revolutionary. So the very reason why you want us over in Africa is the reason why they want your ass over here. You think you're getting all these, you think you're getting into all these schools because you're smart? They want you to be Black and look Black so that when they get accused of being racist, they can point to you as a living diversity poster, and they know that you're never, ever, ever going to question anything because the areas that you're coming from, you're so grateful to be here, you don't experience African American racism like we do. Until you get mistaken for one of us, of course. Then when them guns get drawn on you, or that noose get put around your neck, then you're chanting, "We shall overcome," and no justice, no peace. Then you see it. By the way, that's called a Negro wake-up call. Welcome to America. And you Africans are even worse. Africans, it's usually an African male, African American female combo. You very, very rarely catch the reverse. And it must be some of the most limp-wristed, lily-livered, spineless Black American females, which is a very rare breed. Even the ones that are ghetto and tacky are usually strong-willed. But it must be some of the weakest Black American females ever, because it's very, very rare that a child grows up not getting its culture and its cultural understanding from the female in the family. That's the one you're around the most in the household. So for you to not really identify at all as an African American and only really put that on paper, but really have some pride in your Senegalese half or some pride in your Nigerian half, that tells me that your African American side, that parent was a sucker. Because Forget what John Henrik Clarke told you. Those are all great stories and great fables to hear. I like hearing a lot of them myself. It does give you an idea of how great black folks could be at their height if they really came together and applied themselves. But we don't talk about what happened to make that go away. It wasn't just the big bad boogeyman white person. It was black people did things that didn't stick to a code and became corrupted. I would venture to say selling your own people to who later became your enemy would be a big sign of a fall off. I don't think following those African ideals would be ideal. And if you look at most countries in Africa today, they still believe in that. There's people fleeing these countries by the millions as we speak. There's Libyan slave traders as we speak. There's human trafficking out of Uganda right now. I just watched a video about a British adoption agency that alleged to connect, European family, British families with Ugandan orphans, and turns out none of those kids were orphans. They were shipping them right through the middle, but they were literally flying over the Middle Passage. So ain't nothing really changed. It's updated, it's adapted, but it ain't changed. And Africa's still allowing that to happen. Africa is a place where you go get your resources, be those resources gold, oil, cobalt, coltan, zinc, diamonds, or people. They let it go for dirt cheap. We know more than anybody. So the next time somebody brings up one of these whack-ass African versus African American arguments and talking points, and they try to keep it to who's got better college degrees or who's got better SAT scores or who's got more high-paying jobs, keep in mind all the points I just gave you. They wouldn't be here if it wasn't for us, and we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them. You could damn near blame all African suffering in the world on Nigeria if you really wanted to, or West Africa. Number two, you benefit greatly from imitating us. We got trust issues with you. Three, what do you actually benefit us? When you're here, you're competition. When you're there, you have no power. What can you provide us culturally, since we're so culturally lost? What can you provide us as far as tangible resources? Nothing. That's why you're here. So I don't want to hear any of this bullshit without stating those facts first. And for a person like Zoe Williams, who I know for a fact is a very well-versed cat, I've really heard him drop some serious knowledge, but at the same time, I know he's one of those type of black guys that's like a fan of the Moors. It's cool, all the stuff that they did, all the accomplishments they made, but them niggas weren't selling us as slaves. So we got to keep that in perspective. And weren't exactly us, so to speak. I was just really disappointed to see him go in there and literally not put up any kind of a fight. And not necessarily say we have to fight, because I don't even think we need to be at odds with each other. I'm still leaving room open for cooperation. I think circumstances are going to force cooperation, but to not even really put up any argument, not even really speak our mouthpiece, and not really say what our side of the issues are, and to just let them unload on us like they always do. It seems like African Americans feel like because we're the older brother. And yeah, we're the older brother because we quote unquote got lucky enough to be in America, that we have to kind of let them beat up on us a little bit so that they feel better. When the truth is, we're too good to them. We're too good to everybody. This is literally somebody selling you off to a kidnapper, you getting to the kidnapper's house, beating up the kidnapper, and you open up the door so that the person that sold you to the kidnapper can get in and get all the stuff. These people don't even speak on our issues when we have issues. So if we're gonna, have African Americans versus African talks, let's really have, real African Americans that's not afraid to speak on it, that know what they're talking about, speak on it. If you're gonna have an African Americans versus Africans talk, put Yvette Carnell, Antonio Moore, and Saren Sensei on there. That's three strong African Americans, three strong, proud African Americans, and I'd be more than happy to speak their part and let any African who feels like they want to let us know something, let them know something. It's embarrassing hearing Zoe go up there and talk about that, and somebody got to just mention Mansa Musa or something. Really? We used to be Moors? Oh, tell me more. I want to be like you, Mr. African. Sell my people out, have them live in poverty and corruption, and only you got a little bit of money? That's great. But that's really all I'm going to speak about today. Just the African Americans versus African thing. I'm going to keep coming back to this, but I really, really want to work towards deading this because I've given up on Pan Africanism. I think as presently constituted, it is bullshit. We literally don't get nothing out of it. But I think there's hope if we reconfigured it. And whether or not Africans want to believe it on the surface, they do need us badly. And they know it. They're just trying to bluff. That's the thing I want to get to African Americans. They're trying to bluff. You haven't been talking to them in almost half a millennia. They have not given a shit about you in half a millennia. Now all of a sudden, everything on YouTube, everything on social media is African American this. Why don't the African Americans respect us? Why don't they like us? Don't they know we're better than them? Why don't they talk to us? What's the split? What's the divide? What's their cultural difference? What's their blah 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 blah? African Americans don't mention Africans. Africans will come up to America and say Black Americans have no culture, while copying Black American culture. Sitting there draped in Black American gear, bumping trap music, eating fried chicken, living in Harlem, living in DC, going to a HBCU, talking about Black people have no culture on Martin Luther King Day. like, you got some damn nerve. But that's pretty much it, y'all. I'm signing out. Just if you're a Black American and you see this African American versus African stuff and you see these Africans getting buck wild, remember the points I put here and be sure to throw them things back in their face.